You hurt yourself, and you're still here. Not out of masochism, not out of a lack of dignity, out of something much harder to name. That quiet, incomprehensible force that means that even after the hurtful words, even after the heartbreaking silences, even after the moments when you thought it was the last time, something refused to treat this story as over. And you don't fully understand why. Because rationally, you see what's wrong. You're not blind. You're not someone who ignores the signs. You know exactly what happened, who said what, who did what, how much it hurt, and how many times. And yet you still know that this connection isn't ordinary, that something within him, or her, touches a chord that nothing else has touched in the same way. Perhaps you're no longer together, but the bond refuses to die cleanly. Perhaps you're still in this cycle, these comings and goings, these hurts and reconciliations, without knowing how to get out and without being entirely sure you want to. Perhaps you're wondering if what you share is love or something else, or both at once in a way that simple words can't capture. Tonight, I'm going to show you something no one has yet clearly explained about why two people who hurt each other can never truly leave each other. Not a condemnation, not a justification of the suffering. A real, psychological, precise understanding of what's happening between the two of you on a level neither of you fully sees yet. Carl Jung, one of the greatest explorers of the human soul the world has ever known, spent decades observing couples, bonds, and connections that persisted through exactly what you describe. The pain, the breakups, the attempts at separation that never quite resulted in separation. And what he discovered about the psychic nature of these bonds completely changes how we must understand them. And the concept he developed to explain this phenomenon is called mystical participation, a term he borrowed from the anthropologist Lévi-Brühl to describe something precise, a state in which two beings are not entirely distinct from one another in psychic space, a state in which a part of what belongs to you exists in him, and a part of what belongs to him exists in you, so profoundly that the separation becomes, in a real psychological sense, a form of self-mutilation. In a nutshell, mystical participation is the state in which two psyches are so intertwined that they can no longer separate entirely without partially losing themselves. This is not codependency in the common and superficial sense of the term. It is something more fundamental, more structural, more profound. Jung observed something that contradicts everything the modern world wants to believe about healthy love and functioning relationships. He observed that the bonds that produce the most suffering are not necessarily the shallowest. Sometimes they are the deepest, precisely because the depth of the bond has created a psychic entanglement that makes separation painful in a way that superficial relationships never produce. When two people hurt each other and can't leave, the world tells them it's a sign they should break up. And perhaps it's right in a practical, protective sense. But what Jung would say, what deep psychology says, is that this inability to leave isn't simply weakness or misplaced dependence. It's a sign that something structurally psychological has occurred between them. And this is the mechanism you need to understand. The mechanism that the world has never been able to clearly explain to you. When two people have experienced something intense enough, deep enough, real enough in its emotional intensity, their psyches begin to interpenetrate, not symbolically, structurally. Parts of each begin to exist within the other's psychic space. And this interpenetration does something specific. It creates a psychological dependence that has nothing to do with a lack of personality or a fear of solitude. It's a dependence on how the other person continues something you can't continue alone. Not because they're better than you, or because you're inadequate without them, because something of you has developed through them, in that space between you, in a way that can't simply be relocated. And when you hurt each other, when something in the relationship hurts, the hurt doesn't just touch the surface. It touches that part of you that exists within him, and that part of him that exists within you. And that's why it hurts so much. That's why it's so hard to leave. And somewhere deep down, you already knew it. You sensed that what was happening between you wasn't an ordinary relationship with an ordinary hurt, that the pain had a different quality, more intimate, more precise, closer to something that belonged to you than something inflicted upon you from the outside. Something inside you knew that what you carried from that relationship wasn't just what he had done to you. It was also something of yourself that the relationship had brought to light. Herein lies the paradox at the heart of this painful connection, and it is the hardest to hear because it directly contradicts what the pain tells you to do. Two people who are injured and cannot leave are not prisoners of each other. They are prisoners of parts of themselves that they have not yet recovered. Just one sentence, and it completely changes what this link requires. Jung would explain this paradox in this way. In the state of mystical participation, the two people projected aspects of themselves onto the other. Not deliberately, not consciously. But the depth of the bond created a psychic transference. Parts of each that are no longer entirely contained within their own psyche, but now exist in the shared space, and partly within the psyche of the other. And when the wound occurs, when something in the relationship hurts, it's not just the other person who is hurting. It's that part of yourself that you invested in them that comes back wounded. And that wound, because it touches something that belongs to you, is of a different nature than an ordinary wound. And that's why leaving is so difficult. Because leaving means not only leaving him, but also reclaiming or permanently losing the part of yourself you invested in that shared space. And this reclaiming, if it isn't done consciously, produces a feeling of self-loss that is anything but imaginary. It's a real loss. Psychological, profound. The solution, therefore, is not simply to leave. The solution is to understand what you put into it and to take it back. To bring back into your own psyche what you deposited in the relationship and which still belongs to you, even if the other person is no longer there to give it back to you directly. This repatriation movement goes through several phases that you may be able to recognize. The first phase is what I call the painful fusion. This is the state you may have been in for a while now. A state where you're no longer quite sure where your emotions end and theirs begin. Their pain becomes your pain. Their anger affects you as if it were your own. Their decisions impact your inner state in ways that seem disproportionate to what reason would expect. During this phase, people around you might tell you that you're too involved, that you should distance yourself, that their emotions shouldn't affect you so much. But this advice, however well-intentioned, misses something essential. It treats your reactions as an emotional overreaction when they are actually the result of a genuine psychological state. You're not overly sensitive, you're entangled. It's not the same thing. And as long as this phase is not understood for what it is, not a character flaw, but a psychic reality, the separation cannot take place properly, because it produces a loss of self that nothing has yet been able to repair. The second phase is what I call the recurring injury. This is the phase of the cycle. Those moments when something heals between you, when the connection regains its warmth, when something that felt like an ending begins again. And then something breaks again, not necessarily in the same way, but with the same structure, the same kind of pain, the same place that hurts. Jung would have recognized this pattern immediately. This cycle, this repetition of the hurt, isn't proof that you're bad for each other, in the sense that you should run away. It's proof that something unresolved is returning to seek resolution in the only space where it has already begun to be seen. And as long as this something remains unresolved, not between you, but within each of you separately, the cycle will continue. The third phase is what I call painful lucidity. This is the phase you may be in now. This ability to see clearly what is happening, to name the cycle, to understand that something repeated cannot be solely the fault of the other person, and to ask yourself what you are carrying in all of this. This clarity is difficult, because it forces you to look not only at what he did to you, but what you allowed, what you may have provoked, what your own unintegrated blind spots contributed to creating in the space between you. But this clarity is also the first step towards something real, because as long as the responsibility lay entirely with him, you had no power. Clarity makes you an active participant, and this position, however uncomfortable it may be, is the only one from which something can truly change. But here is what Jung would now add, and this is the most difficult part, the part that requires the most courage. This painful connection has shown you something, not just about him, about yourself, about the parts of yourself that keep getting hurt again and again because they haven't yet been seen, understood, integrated. The question Jung would ask you is direct. How is the type of pain you experienced in this relationship similar to pain you've known before? Not with him, before him. In other stories, in other relationships, in something that preceded all of this. Because the wounds we repeat in relationships aren't inflicted on us randomly. They land in areas that already existed, areas where something hasn't yet healed. And the people who hurt us don't create these areas. They bring them to light. And if you can identify the area, if you can name what this connection has brought to light about your own older wound, then you can begin to work on something that truly belongs to you. Something that can heal, whether this connection continues or not. What you experienced was real. The pain was real. And the fact that you couldn't simply leave, that fact you carried as a shame or a weakness, that wasn't weakness. It was proof that something deep and real happened in that space between the two of you. You deserve to understand this connection for what it truly is. Not to be trapped by it, not to be condemned to it, not to leave, abandoning a part of yourself in the process, but to navigate it with enough clarity to reclaim what belongs to you and to reach the other end of it all more whole than you were before entering it. This connection cost you something. It also taught you something. What you do with that learning, how you transform it into self-knowledge rather than a scar, is where and only where something permanent can change. You are not a prisoner of him. You are a prisoner of something within you that only he had the power to bring to light. And this light, however painful it may be, is a gift you did not ask for, but that you can now choose to use. Just tell me one thing in the comments. Are you also caught in a painful relationship that you can't completely break free from right now? Just one word is enough. I read every message. Subscribe if you haven't already, and share this video tonight with someone who's going in circles in a difficult relationship. Someone who needs to know that what they're experiencing isn't weakness, but something much deeper that deserves to be understood. Take care of yourself.